Officials say a Chinese warship with spying capabilities is nearing the western coast of Australia.
It's obviously very strange that it's come this far south and it's hugging the coastline as it goes north. And its intention will be to collect as much electronic intelligence as it can.
Australia's defense minister calls it, quote, an aggressive act. It also says it is unprecedented for a Chinese war vessel to be so close to Australia. And joining me now to discuss is Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War and the Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, welcome back. Always good to see you. What do you make of this? And why do you think China is interested in spying on Australia?
Well, it's very close to a base where U.S. submarines call in. And also the interesting thing about this, Tracy, is that it's just before Australia's national elections, which are on the 21st. And this is not going to help those candidates who have been friendly toward Beijing. But it just shows the aggressiveness of China's intelligence collection mechanism.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, as you just heard, Australia is calling this an act of aggression. How do you perceive this? And also, where do you see this going?
Yeah, that intelligence ship is in international water, but it's in Australia's exclusive economic zone, which is the band of water between 12 and 200 nautical miles. It is considered to be an aggressive act, though it is illegal. I think what this will do, though, is we'll get Australia to actually put more into defense. One of the other things about this incident, it shows that Australia doesn't have a ship to trail the Chinese ship, which is normal operating procedure. The Australians are looking at it only from planes, and that is a real indication of the weakness of the Royal Australian Navy.
On a different note, as I mentioned, Cardinal Parolin issued a statement regarding Cardinal Zen's arrest in Hong Kong, saying in part that he was treated well in jail. I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Gordon, how you see this situation playing out. And as you know, if convicted, Cardinal Zen faces life in prison.
Yes, he is 90 years old, so whatever sentence they give him is probably a life sentence. Really, what the Communist Party is trying to do is to end religion in Hong Kong. Because Cardinal Zen was the last major opposition figure who was not in jail, with Jimmy Lai, the publisher of Apple Daily, now in jail in what is effectively a life sentence. This is having a chilling effect on the church. The church is not this year going to have its June 4th masses to commemorate June 4th, 1989, the massacre in Beijing. And I think that as we see the same pattern the Communist Party has used elsewhere, they will start going after sermons, and eventually they will be closing churches in Hong Kong.
John Lee, as you know, who's also Catholic, is taking over as chief executive of Hong Kong. He said action will be taken regardless of a person's background when someone is being accused of breaching national security. That said, what do you think this signals, Gordon, and what kind of message is it sending to Catholics there?
John Lee on Sunday was just elected to be the 5th chief executive of Hong Kong. He doesn't take office until July 1st, but what it does signify is a much harder line under a John Lee administration. Things weren't good under Carrie Lam, the current chief executive, but they're going to get much worse. And that's really a signal not only to the faithful in Hong Kong, but to everybody else.
Yeah. As you know, here in the United States, yesterday, President Biden commemorated a somber milestone, the United States hitting 1 million COVID-19 deaths. Meanwhile, North Korea announced its first outbreak of the virus and enacted a nationwide lockdown. Why do you think that North Korea is now just admitting that its country is also battling the virus?
That's a fascinating question because North Korea has had this virus from the very beginning of the pandemic. I think what they're doing is they're signaling that now they do want international help. And what they're saying is that they want the mRNA vaccines of America rather than the Chinese vaccines, which have shown not to work very well against any variant of this disease, but especially Omicron BA2, which is what is ripping through North Korea at this moment.
And Gordon, before I let you go, not a whole lot of time, but I do want to touch on this. The United States, besides COVID, is also seeing an unprecedented number of deaths due to drug overdoses, in particular fentanyl. And as you know, much of this is coming over the U.S. southern border. Let's talk about that and the role that China plays in this fentanyl crisis that we're facing.
Well, China's Communist Party is behind the far-flung international fentanyl gangs. You can't run a near total surveillance state and say that you're not behind this large-scale criminal activity. So we should consider those Americans who have died from Chinese fentanyl to actually been murdered by China. That's what they wanted. That's what they're getting. And until we have an administration that is willing to talk about China in connection with fentanyl and to do so in candid terms, this epidemic will continue and Americans will die in the tens of thousands a year from Chinese fentanyl.
Well, Gordon, we always appreciate your insight. Thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Tracy. I appreciate it.